Welcome to Metropolitan Community College's first Diversity Matters book series discussion of the 23-24 academic year. In our 16th year, I want to thank those who attend the book series presentations, watch the on-demand recordings when convenient to your schedule, or add the book titles and authors to your reading list. We have heard you over the 16 years. Your comments and behaviors have directed our decisions and actions, inspiring us to continue the important work of encouraging people to read and promoting diverse topics and authors. If you'd like to revisit any of the discussions throughout the year, go to mccneb.edu/book series, where links to recordings will be held. You can also explore on MCC's YouTube page, and I'll post both of these addresses in the chat today. Your microphones and chat with other audience members are turned off. Send your messages or questions for our discussion leader through the chat function to moderator Barbara Velasquez. I will present your questions to our discussion leader, and I'll keep your identity confidential so that you will feel comfortable in asking any question. Please also watch the chat for important messages. The online evaluation link will be presented, and you'll have an opportunity to win a copy of today's book, American Like Me. A native of Chile, Katty Petak moved to Nebraska as an exchange student during her senior year of high school. She is an alum of Metropolitan Community College, achieving her academic transfer liberal arts degree before attending the University of Nebraska at Kearney for her undergraduate degrees in teaching and translation and interpretation. She was very active in campus life, building relationships with mentors who inspired her to find a career that involved helping students outside of the classroom. Petak built upon that interest by receiving a master's degree in higher education and administration from Michigan State University. She has been on the staff at College of St. Mary since fall of 2001. Her service started as a director of student leadership and organizations before her promotion to assistant dean of students and then associate dean of students due to her effective work and ability to develop mentoring relationships with students. In the summer of 2020, she received a promotion to serve as a senior director of alumni relations. Petak has developed and established several programs and organizations at CSM, including the Leadership Launch Program and DUO, Do Unto Others, an organization that focuses on service to others. Most recently, she established the RISE Mentoring Program, which pairs CSM alumni with current CSM juniors and seniors. Of the 20 students involved in its first year, 11 were from underrepresented minorities. In addition to her role at CSM, Petak has a voice at the University for the Latina community. 23% of the students at CSM are Latina, a number that has grown in the last 20 years due in part to Petak's efforts. She was instrumental in the development of CSM retention efforts focused on Latina students and the establishment of the annual Latina Summer Academy for area high school youth. She helped establish the Misericordia Scholarship, which is funded by donors and provided to undocumented students of diverse backgrounds who are not eligible for federal financial assistance. It covers tuition, room, and board. Petak feels strongly about guiding young Latina women in finding their identity as women and professionals, following a quote from Catherine McCauley, founder of the Sisters of Mercy. No work is more productive of good to society than the careful education of women. In addition, she has represented the university well through her involvement with external organizations, such as the Heartland Latino Leadership Scholarship Committee, the Multicultural Coalition, the Conference for Inclusive Communities, El Camino Latino Conference, and served as a president of the Nebraska Women in Higher Education Leadership Organization. Last year, she was selected to serve as a staff representative for the Presidential Search Committee for the new CSM president. She lives in Omaha with her husband, Adam, and their daughters, Catalina and Anabela. Please welcome back to Metropolitan Community College, Katty Petak.
Thank you, Barbara. It's true. Welcome back myself here earlier. I'm surprised to see how much the campus has grown. I look back in the time that I spent here, it was instrumental in my success. In fact, the things that you read, there's always people who come and go out of your life and you're never the same. And Barbara, you were one of those. I always talk about my time here, and your support had a lot to do with who I am today. So thank you, Barbara, for having me. So we'll start. So today here, I am serving as an alum of Metro Community College, but also as someone who would talk about the book American Like Me by America Ferrera. So first, I just want to give you, I know Barbara read a background as far as like my professional life, but I just want to give you a little bit, and if you can change the slide, thank you. So here's my family. This is the most recent picture of all of us. I was born in Chile. I moved to United States when I was 16 to a very small town, St. Paul, Nebraska, which most people don't even know where it's at who live in Nebraska. It's under 2,000 people. I came from a family of 5 siblings and then my parents, and I have my family of my own. There's one person who's not in the picture, which is my sister. She's the only one who was not unable to come. That is because she has been denied a visa like 4 or 5 times. So that's another subject for another topic for another day. Anyway, I consider, well, I'm obviously bilingual, but I also consider myself bicultural because I live in 2 worlds. And I think that's part of the reason Barbara asked me to be the lead on this conversation. I have more than 25 years of experience in higher education. So learning is part of what I believe is something that we should all do regardless. It's not a destination, but rather a journey, and that is to be a lifelong learner. So that we're learning something new today, myself included. So next page. So this is just a summary of what this book is about. For those of you who have not had a chance to read it, hopefully the discussion today will entice you to read it. It's basically short stories that America asked other people to write about themselves. It's basically people who are either immigrants, such as myself, or people who are born to immigrants who live in United States. And they're short stories. There's several people who I myself did not know, and some that I did. So like Lori Hernandez, a famous gymnast, Wilmer Valderrama, Jeremy Lin, Ravi Patel, etc. So the nice thing about this book that the stories are from people, various different backgrounds, not only ethnically, culturally, but also who they are now. Some are actors, activists, writers, gymnasts, athletes, etc. So I think that in itself gives you a pretty rich idea of how diverse we are in this country and what we bring to the table. What I appreciate about the book is that it highlights more in a positive light immigrants who often receive, negative feedback or perceptions if you're an immigrant from a non-white country. Because we do have a lot of immigrants in this country. It's founded by immigrants, but when you are of a different race, that's a different conversations when it comes to immigration. And I think a lot of the stories come from the idea that most people who have come to this country for looking for a better life, right? The American dream, which we will talk about in a little bit. You'll see, like I said, plenty of stories from various people, but clearly Ferrera is trying to highlight how diverse our country is in terms of who lives here and who is successful and the opportunities that are in this country, right? We call, again, the American dream. What does that mean? How can you attain it? And so the stories from all of these writers is their own story. That's what I appreciate. It's not somebody writing on behalf of them. It's themselves writing about their own story. And you find that there's some similarities, some things that are different, but at the end of the day, the lens varies depending what part of the country perhaps they came to, what kind of career they were looking for, and whether they fit in or not, which is something that I will talk about in a little bit. And some of the commonalities whether that is true or not, that is, many of them talked about how they're mom and dad, or just their dad came to this country with $16 in their pocket, which I have heard that story from students about their parents. And so there might be some truth to that. You know, they were searching for a better life, not just for themselves, but their family, and sometimes for their whole community. There's one chapter all about the Indian culture, Nepalese culture. When you come here, you come in and you have to give back to the people who are left behind. So there's a lot of responsibility that falls into their shoulders. I think it's Rishma Sauhani. Hopefully I'm pronouncing her name correctly. She said, this is the country where there's no key change for us. So if you go to, for all of us who have gone somewhere, even here in Omaha or Council Bluff, if I went somewhere where there's key change, can I find my name? You know, for many immigrant children or immigrants themselves, they couldn't find their name because it doesn't sound like somebody else. It doesn't look like somebody else. So that's the first, I appreciate that comment, something that may seem so simple, but that was the first time when she realized my name is not like anyone else. So when somebody started reminding you, you don't look like someone, you don't like the majority, I should say, you don't sound like the majority, or your name doesn't even exist when you go to Disneyland or Disney World or Worlds of Fun for that matter, I can't find my keychain, right? And so, and some of them talk about carrying history and some unknown history. Some of them talk about how their parents didn't talk about their history back home. And perhaps was because it was too painful. And as a parent myself, I realize sometimes we protect our children by not telling them the entire truth because we think it's too heavy. And it is. And maybe there's a time when you eventually do that. So that part really resonated with me in terms of why is it sometimes we keep the truth from our children? And it has to do because we're trying to be protective, but is that the best thing to do? That was another thing that I thought about. Another thing too, that one thing that seemed to be in common is most of them, if not all of them, were talking about to succeed, there has to be hard work, determination, but with that comes a lot of family sacrifices. So, and the idea is that you can get anything you want if you work hard. Yes, but if we all succeeded, like all of these writers, everybody would be famous, right? And so, but that's not necessarily the truth. And what is the definition of success? That's what I keep asking myself. I consider myself a successful person. It doesn't mean I'm famous or I'm in this book, but my story is similar to them. I'm just not at that level of quote unquote success or being known. But that my story doesn't deteriorate any differently than somebody else who's sitting next to me, including the gentlemen who are behind the scenes. So many of them also alluded to coming from multicultural, very diverse neighborhoods. And once they step out of that neighborhood is when they realize some of the differences that people were pointing out. Because unless you're in front of a mirror, you don't realize you're different than someone else until somebody points it out. Or I very often get, where are you from? And I said, oh, I'm from Omaha. No, not really, where are you from? Okay, so then that starts a whole nother story. And feeling that obligation to tell people, and sometimes I don't. I'm like, I'm an educator. So sometimes I'm like, I don't feel like educating somebody today. But I could see myself through their experience in some areas, you know, when people constantly questioning your name. America talks about like her name was so significant that she hated it because she would be in school and people would be asking, how come your name is America? You know, and I think part of the reason she pointed out that was hard because I think people say, well, you don't look like America. So how come you have that name? Why? Because she's from Honduras. Well, she was born here, but her parents are from Honduras, so she didn't look like the mainstream America. Even when I was talking to someone about what does it mean, what does your name mean? Why is it important to pronounce it correctly? Or at least try, because there's names I can't pronounce. They're hard for me, but trying to pronounce somebody's name is the least way I can show respect to somebody's identity. Because our names carry a lot of, it's one thing I own that no one can take. Granted, we were talking about earlier, when I first moved to the United States, people call me Katie. They didn't call me Katty. And I never corrected someone because, mind you, I'm in a town of 1,968 people. Everyone knew I was the exchange student. The other exchange student was from Denmark, and he was 6'4", blonde, tall, blue eyes, and spoke perfect English. I did not speak English, short, 5'1", dark. So we were polar opposites. And in fact, our experiences were very different. But we did go to prom together because we were like the two outcasts. So this was the picture. But anyway, another thing I noticed about this book, that music and food are things that people often mention because they provide comfort. They provide a sense of identity for many of us. And I think the most simple food, that's the thing. Some of them is like, I hated that I had to eat this every single day. But then now I ask my mom to send me that food, and, because he can afford for somebody to send it to him, excuse me. And so food, and it brings people together. I think about when we go home and we visit, we all say, I warn my kids and my husband and say, you can't say no to people, because that's their way of manifesting love for you, right? Whether it's the most simple food or not, whether it's sit down time for tea and pan, and whatever it is, food brings people together. So a lot of them talk about the importance of food, how maybe they might not like it and they wanted Burger King really bad, but now they crave their childhood food, because it's not only the food, but the people who cook for them, whether that was their grandma, whether that was their, abuelitas or tios, or whoever was that was supporting them through that, nurturing their bodies, also nurtures their soul and their whole well-being. So that connection, when I go home, my mom would say, what do you want when you arrive? It's like a list of things I want to eat when I get home. I do wish, though, sometimes these stories are about very successful people, right? And so that can temper a little bit of understanding how the rest of the world who are immigrants, who live in this country, or children of immigrants, what the experience is like. Again, like I said earlier, success is defined in very different ways for people. So because I don't want to skew this for people to think, see, if you work hard, you can get whatever you want. So I don't understand why sometimes immigrants can't succeed, or they want a handout. I'm like, that's not what this is about. So I think we have to be very careful how we take note on this book. Granted, I think Ferrera was trying to highlight that while all these people are successful, it wasn't easy for them. Many of them had to overcome a lot of things throughout their childhood, their, whatever age is that they're writing about. So, but each of these stories are very personal, very interesting. And I think if you have not read this book, it's an easy way to read because they're short and they vary in terms of their background. So it makes it very interesting. And you can put it down. You can not skip one, but go to one and then go back to the other one. So they're not chronologically done. So that makes it also a much easy read. One of them, and I will quote this part, it says, my grandmother showed me that people who start out with nothing, those who will be considered worthless under new immigration standards, can be the seeds that bear significant contributions to American society. So when you think about the history of the United States, there's a lot of contribution from people from all sorts of backgrounds. Again, this country was founded by immigrants, but coming here also means a lot of things that can alter the way you think. That's why, or the way you view the world, because once the world starts viewing you differently, then you look at yourself differently, and that can work against you or for you. So you have to be very careful for what that entails. I was very impressed by who she asked to write this in her own story in Honduras. America didn't have that relationship with her father. I don't want to give out all the details, but her going back home and learning about her father truly helped her understand who she is, how some of the stuff are kind of in your DNA, like the activism part that she loves to do, that kind of came from her great grandfather. And so understanding that, it made her realize, this is who I am. So this made me think about understanding the past helps you understand the present, and also helps you shape the future. I think oftentimes like the past is in the past, but how do we not repeat history that has been harmful to people? And how do we understand the past to get here? Even for me today, coming back to this campus, it reminded me when I first came here to Omaha, this was the place that nurtured me. This was the place that gave me an opportunity. And that is significant to where I am today, and even where I would be tomorrow. So I think those are the things that are kind of big highlights for me in terms of reading all of the different stories. So if we can go to the next. So couple takeaways. And there's simple things. There's no rocket science or any that I'm sharing today. So just disclaimer right now, there's no rocket science. So the takeaways is, do I belong? Many of them ask themselves, do I belong here? Because somebody asked a question or say something to them that make them think, why am I being asked that? As simple as, why is your name that? Or why do you do your hair this way? Or why do you eat this food? You know, some of them, which made me think about my kids. I used to send them to school with certain things that no one else would take. And they were like, Mom, I can't take this anymore. Nobody else eats this. And I was like, but they loved it. But it was, somebody let them know they were different. So we switched to peanut butter and jelly, which I never have had one. Till the day of today, I can't have one, sorry. But one of my daughters likes it, right? But my children are biracial, bicultural too. So I have to embrace both aspects. But again, my point on this is, do I belong? Nobody asks that question unless somebody makes you feel like you don't. And so I think all of them in these stories experience that and mention that. Another thing, the definition of true American, what does that mean? And by the way, we know America is not a country, it's a continent, which is a very hard conversation to have sometimes with people, because they feel, I have shared that with people and they have told me, I'm offended that you tell me but that I can't say I'm not an American. I said, I'm not saying you can't say that. What I'm trying to share with you is that outside of United States, there's the continent of America, North America, South America, Central America. So in essence, I could say I'm American too. I'm a South American from Chile. I say Chilena, or whatever the case. So what is the definition of true American? That is for anybody to define, right? And I think that is where, or when I point out things that can be difficult for people to hear, it's considered anti-American. And that's not what I'm saying. I'm a very proud United States citizen. I am proud to live here. This is where I form myself. Like, my adult life has been in United States. I have lived in United States longer than I lived back home. So that definition can vary. That's all that I want people to remember. But there's not just one define of what it means to be a true American. Microaggressions, for some of you, if I want to do a poll here, let me tell you what microaggression stands for, right? As it's an everyday slights, insults, put downs, invalidation, or offensive behavior that people experience in daily interactions with one another, generally with well-intentioned individuals who may not be aware that they're engaging in demeaning ways. So we have a poll, if we can do that right now. So, okay, so the question is, have you ever experienced yourself towards you, or have heard someone use a microaggression towards somebody that you know? So if it hasn't been towards you, maybe somebody you have known. Or perhaps yourself unintentionally said a microaggression and somebody pointed that out. So yes or no, have you experienced this? I'm just curious for those who are attending. So we'll wait a couple seconds. So I repeat it. So have you yourself experienced a microaggression or have heard of microaggressions towards someone you know, or you have said a microaggression unbeknownst to you?
Kathy, you probably can't see the results. Is that correct?
Yes, but also I think they're not coming through. Did you?
I see the results and they are astounding.
Okay.
We have 24 answers. 23 of them said yes, they have experienced a microaggression towards you or others.
Okay. Yes. And they can be very small. You know, myself, I have experienced them, even with the best intentions of the best people I know. You know, things such as small as like, for example, when I tell people this is my title. Oh, wow. And I always ask, why are you so surprised? Were you not expecting me, like someone with an accent, to be successful? Or I don't ask that question because I don't want to put people in that situation. Or that one is not one that I address. But for example, I have heard before people complaining about people not speaking English or, well, you're like one of us. I said, what do you mean one like you? Okay, please elaborate on that. And then they stumble because they're like, they don't realize what they have said to me. Or one time I was at a desk and somebody was in front of me and the person was helping them and they left. Clearly the gentleman didn't speak English as well. And she's like, oh, go back to your country. And I said, excuse me? And she said, oh, no, that's fine. You can stay. Mexicans can stay. And I said, excuse me? She's like, aren't you from Mexico? I'm like, no, but that's not the point. I said, it was not at my current institution. It was a different institution, or it wasn't at Metro either. So let me say that. It was elsewhere I worked. I said, I am embarrassed that you work for us, that you work in representing this institution. I said, you cannot treat people this way. And she got really quiet. And I said, what I was asking is, where is room 347? I said, you do customer service. That means you respect everybody who comes through this desk. I was really upset because he didn't have a chance to defend himself, but more importantly, it was the lack of respect. And there was microaggression after one after another. And when I said, no, I'm not from Mexico, are you sure? Excuse me? Like, it was like, so it was very interesting. I still remember this happened over 25 years ago, but you still remember those things. So when I was asked for 2 IDs to pay with a check, yes, it's from the time when there was no Venmo, and I'm at a store and this lady follows me the entire time. And then when I came to pay, she asked me for 2 forms of ID to pay with my check. But she didn't ask the next person the same. So those are small microaggressions that can really, those were times when I was like, what's happening? Why is this happening to me? I don't understand, right? So that moves me into the survival mode, which is the next things that many people, when you experience those things, you go in survival mode. And survival mode looks very different for people. I used to just like not say anything, but as more educated I came, and then more, I felt more comfortable and confident in myself, I will stand out when those things happen, which you could see that throughout the book. People going from that survival mode to living their life and understanding that it's okay to say something to the next person. And again, microaggression is one of those things. It's not about intent, but impact. Sometimes people say, I didn't mean to offend you. I know you didn't, but I need you to understand the impact of your comment, because that's the only way things will change, or microaggressions will continue. And even some microaggressions can be positive ones, but they can still impact people. So when there is this stereotype of that are positive stereotypes, right? But they still put pressure on people. So you have to be careful about that. Some of the other takeaways from this is coexisting in two different worlds. Like some of them talk about, like, when I'm at home, I'm full Palestinian, I'm full whatever it is, but back outside at school, I was American. So because they're coexisting in two worlds and trying to fit in both worlds, sometimes with their parents, their neighborhood, or sometimes at school with their teachers or their counterparts, you know. So the idea of coexisting in two worlds can be complicated and for individuals. The last thing is the American dream. And I thought a lot about it throughout the book. Why do we call it the American dream? I think that's almost anyone's dream to be successful and to make it in life. So it's not just the American dream, it's the humankind dream. That's what humans want. You can live in the most remote part of the world, not even know the United States exists, and you still may have the same dream, right? However, this is the land of opportunity. So we go into the next page. This is the definition of the American dream. They believe that anyone, regardless where they were born or what class they were born into, can attain their own version of success in a society in which upward mobility is possible for everyone. It is true that is not the reality in every country in this world. And this is the land of opportunities. But let's not forget, opportunity is not everything. It's also, is there room for everyone to be as successful? The answer, from my perspective, is no, right? In the level that we see it in this book, not everybody's going to make it to be, to work for Barack Obama. Not everyone is going to make it to be on the Lakers team or to be the top gymnast in the world, right? However, that doesn't mean your American dream cannot come true if you put some work into it and desire, but you have to have the support system, and we have to acknowledge the barriers that people face. So that's just one little tick about the American dream. And how are we doing on time?
It's 1:02.
Okay, just one last thing in the next, and so we'll open. Things to remember really quick. Names are important. Think about the significance of your own name. Why does it matter how people pronounce it? At least try to pronounce it, but don't disregard somebody's name because it's hard for you to pronounce it. What is the cultural connection for people? It gives us a sense of belonging. Every year I celebrate Chilean Independence Day. Whatever, if it falls on a Tuesday, we do it on a Saturday, but that's part of what brings me joy, right? What are we teaching our youth about others? I think that's what is the pop culture teaching. I think our children are way more open than that we were at their age. Pay attention to around those who are around you who stand out, but they're fitting in. What is the cost of that for them? What is it costing them emotionally to be there and try to fit in when they clearly stand out? If I walk into a room, I clearly stand out at work right now, right? Because there's not many of us. But what is the cost of that? That's a question as an ally you can ask. And the sacrifice, how much those have sacrificed for them to get to be at the table, right? My parents sacrificed the idea of not having the adult children live with them. That's a huge sacrifice, right? Immigrants, we get the job done. That's a perception, right? What can we learn from that? But be careful with this too. At what cost? What do we get done? Like I think about the students I work with, their parents work really, really hard. And that's what I talked about one of them today. I know your parents work hard and you're working so you can change a little bit of that cycle so you can be, be first generation, the first girl in your whole family to graduate from college. And always remember that culture defines us. Living in two worlds, and how do we support each other, right? This is not something none of them did this alone to be successful. Everyone has somebody who supported them. And sometimes takes someone who doesn't look like us to help us. Or sometimes those who look like us are part of that support system too. So those are things to remember when you interact with people when you experience a microaggression, or like you said, 23 of the 24 said that they have or have, experienced themselves or whatnot. So, but that's my talk. So I'm open to questions now.
All right. Well, thank you so much, Katty. I don't want you to disregard all the marvelous things that you have said, because I think we could have continued listening all the way through until 1:30 with no complaints. I do want to encourage the audience that if you look for a message that says respond to this message with your questions, I will receive it, and I will be so happy to share those with Ms. Petak. So we'll get started because we have some questions here, but I want to encourage everybody. This is your opportunity. Katty's a busy woman. You can't find her all the time if you want to ask her a question, right?
Yes.
Okay. So you've shared some of these points, but I'm going to go ahead and ask this question again, Katty, and you might have a different thought that you'd like to give back to us. How did the stories An American Like Me compare to what you experienced or have heard from the many others that you work with who've immigrated to the U.S.?
How do they are different, you said?
How did they compare?
Oh, okay. The similarities of why they're here, especially when I think of the students that I serve, many of them, their families have fled from difficult situations, which was very similar to many of the stories, not all the stories. I think the only difference is kind of like, I hope I made that point across. These people are still working hard, feeling the support of their parents. They may not get to that point where America Ferrera is, right? Or mean that they would be that famous, because the things they're searching for are a little bit different. I think most people are searching for true authenticity, also their sense of belonging and change in their life, because again, kind of goes back to, I always tell students, education is the most precious gift you can receive, because no one can take that away from you. So what I see the similarity that everybody's trying, want to make ends meet, to feel safe. We have some really sad stories, some students who have faced violence, they have cartels experience, who have crossed the border at a very young age. They have no idea what their life was like back in their native countries, and coming here and trying to identify in a world that doesn't necessarily always welcome them, or a world that tells them, no, you don't get to have a driver license. No, you don't get to study nursing because you don't have a social security number. Therefore, you can't take that test when you finish your nursing degree. So in that aspect, they're a little bit different, because everyone in the story finished in a success story. I think my students there's many very successful stories, but are not at the level of what we consider in the stream media to be successful, is that you are in one of these books, or that your name is plastered all over the place. So I think they are successful, it's just in a different way. I hope that answers your question.
Thank you very much. I just wondered, the microaggressions poll that you did it surprise you, Katty, that almost 100% of the respondents said that yes, they had experienced microaggressions?
No, not at all. I would have been more surprised if people said, no, I haven't experienced any, because it doesn't only happen towards people of different race and ethnicity. It happens toward women too, right? So for example, as a woman, when someone tells you you need to be barefoot pregnant in the kitchen, right? Or that you should stay home with your kids, those are microaggressions, right? Those are ways we're saying women belong elsewhere but the workplace. So I think I'm not surprised. I'm also not surprised that perhaps, as I think, if we are honest with ourselves, myself included, we have said some things that are microaggression, because part of it is not knowing they are. And if nobody puts it out to you, clearly is going to continue to happen. I remember getting a ride, my car was getting fixed, and the guy who picked me up to go pick up my car, he was talking about how smart, he's granddaughters were, they all have scholarship. But she's like, and they had to compete really hard because all the Asian kids took the scholarships. And I was like, I said, what do you mean by that? You know, there are the ones that are super smart and they always get all the scholarships. So my granddaughters who are white had to fight for it. And so obviously I was getting off the car, so I didn't have a chance to have more of an educated conversation with the gentleman. But he meant it in a positive way because they're smart kids. He stereotyped. So a microaggression has to do with a generalization of a specific group. So I'm not surprised that many people has experienced them or heard them or felt them for that matter, or said them themselves. So.
All right. Everybody keep sending your questions. So we're going to get right into the book here.
Mm-hmm.
And you don't have to look this up. I just want to throw it out in case anybody wants to write it down. There's a chapter written by Linda Sarsour.
Mm-hmm.
And on page 293, she states, speaking of taunting, accusation of being a terrorist, belittling comments, physical attacks on Muslims, people being killed for their look or beliefs, bans against Muslims entering the U.S., she says, sometimes at my low points, because I am only human, I can feel very done with this mess. I can feel hopeless and done. So while her experiences are different than what others feel, the stresses of being an immigrant could lead many to feeling done. Do you ever feel this way? And how do you bring yourself back to making the difference you want for yourself, your family, and the many communities you serve?
When the way I build myself up, because there's days when I'm done the one bringing up the difficult questions to the table, because there is a perception of being, there she goes again. Why is she thinking about this? You know, but if someone did it for me before, right? And I probably don't even know who those people are, right? And so you cannot expect change if I'm not going to be part of the solution, I don't want to be part of the problem. Granted, the quote that you read, that is, there is times when you have to say, I need time for myself. I need time to just digest everything that's happening, because it hurts just to know that people could do those things simply because you're different. When it comes down to, we focus so much on the differences rather than the similarities of what we all looking for, the basic needs in life, such as shelter, love, and in sense of belonging. So the way I bring myself back is thinking, if I give up on that, am I giving up on my own girls, right? My two girls are my most precious things I own, and no one can take that from me, right? And their experiences are different too. They live in a bicultural world too, and they can choose which parts of, I think when they're at home, certain days are more Chilean and other days, well, one of them always says, I'm Chilean. I'm like, well, actually, by the definition, you are United States. You were born in United States with Chilean background. But I also think we take space in the world. My way of paying rent on this world is by being that person who might have to bring up the difficult conversations to the table. When it gets hard is when you perceive, I'm not only perceived as like difficult sometimes, but is the angry Latina, or like, why can't you just let it be? Because I'm an educator, you know, I have to do this for other people. The benefits I may not even see the benefits of my conversation sometimes. It's for those who come in after us, which is what you will see that a lot of America Ferrera talks about, that like her great grandfather, that's what he did. He was trying to fight the right thing for his family. And let's face it, no, women who advocate tend to be perceived more negatively than men sometimes. And well-behaved women hardly have made history anyway, right? So if I'm going to make history in my own world, that's where I'm going to do it. I'm paying rent for the space I take. So that's my mentality.
Thank you. I appreciate your willingness to answer that difficult question. We're going to go back to the names. I know that you've had a chance to tell us that, but I think there's a passage that deserves a repeating because throughout my life, I've seen this too. So, and again, I might not get this name right. And if I were with the person, I would ask them. But Uzo Aduba, page 271, she's talking about pronouncing names. She's a young girl in her story from Nigeria. And she asked her mom if she could be Zoe. Since at school, no one can say Uzo Amaka. Her mother, she said, didn't even look up from what she was doing. And she said, if they can learn to say Tchaikovsky, Michelangelo, and I don't know how to say this one either, Dostoevsky, they can also learn to say Uswamaka.
Yep.
So your suggestions, Kathy, any more suggestions you would like to give all of us, whether we're in a classroom, whether we're serving people in an educational institution elsewhere, or whether we're encountering people as community members, what are your suggestions on addressing people whose names we believe we cannot pronounce?
I do ask people, I say, may I please, can you repeat your name for me? And sometimes I write it down phonetically in Spanish. One of the most precious gift one of my former supervisor gave me was the first meeting we had. She said, can you tell me how you pronounce your name? You know, and I have found myself saying Katty, Katty. And so then she's like, okay, she wrote it down. She intentionally wanted to make sure she could pronounce my name correctly. And sometimes she corrected people for me because sometimes it gets old for you who are the one who, or when somebody calls me Katty, well, Katty has a very different connotation, right? And so, or I think don't dismiss people when they're trying to tell you how to pronounce their name. At least try. With an accent, there's names, like I said, I can't pronounce correctly, but at least acknowledging, I said, I'm going to do my best. But I have been in situations where people are like, oh, I'm too old to learn. No, I can't. Immediately, they refuse to try. And so that is dismissive of that person. And I can understand, like I said, there's still people who calls me Katie. And I haven't corrected them, and I'm not going to, because it's also a reminder where I've been and when I met those people, what years of my life did I meet these people, and it's that way they call me Katie, right? But I think it's also maybe ask, what is the significance of your name? Because if you can't pronounce it correctly, at least try to understand. Sometimes they may not have a significance, sometimes they do. I have a story behind my name. Other people may not. It's like, well, no, I think that's the town my parents stopped by on the way to when I, whatever the case may be. So, but acknowledging that you may not be able to pronounce it is the first step to letting that person know that you're respecting the pronunciation of their name. So I think it's a hard one because there's some that are really difficult for people.
Yeah.
So,
I will say that today will be a win if at nothing else, we leave this session thinking more about that importance, right?
Yeah.
Kathy might have met my stepdaughter who lived with me, who's now, retired from the Navy and everything. Her name is Ligia. And I thought, that is so close to Lydia, which people say all the time in the United States. And they would tell her they could not say Ligia. Anyway, she came home from high school one day and she said, I can't remember the name she used, but it was like, I'm just going to be Fred because nobody can say my name, right? And it just broke my heart. So I
Yes.
really have strong feelings about that
Oh
too.
my gosh. I can't believe she's retired. I remember her. Oh my
Yeah,
gosh.
she's in her
Yes.
second career. Can you believe it?
Oh no. You're totally aging us, Barbara. So let's let, yeah. That's not the past I want to go back to.
All right.
So, yes.
Okay. So I would like to know
Mm-hmm.
if you work with young people all the time,
Mm-hmm.
what message do you have for young immigrants who are dreaming or planning for their future in terms of how, how they best navigate the world of living in two different worlds?
Absolutely. Actually, there's one part, let me grab the book because I think America said it really well at the end. Um, and this would answer that question, but I think part of it is find the people who you can feel comfortable with your true self, right? With your fears, with your anger, with your hopes, with your dislikes. Because if people accept you with all of that, then that means they're there for you, right? And I have had a few people along the way who have been that for me. But this part, America, in her conclusion, says, I grew up believing I was alone and feeling stuck between cultures. I didn't know other Americans shared my experience because I never saw my story told. I tried shaping an identity that would make sense to other people by shedding pieces of myself and attempting to assimilate. Assimilation can be very dangerous. So, ironically, the opportunities to fulfill my dreams were the ones that required me to embrace my unique identity. I didn't get my career making roles in Real Women Have Curves, The Sisterhood of the Traveling Pants, and Ugly Betty, in spite of who I was. I got them because of who I was, someone who didn't fit easily into the pre existing mold. All the labels that I had been told my whole life would keep me from success, brown, short, chubby, too Americanized, too ethnic looking, etc., were the very aspect that made me perfect for the roles that would make me my dream career a reality. I think that's the best way I can summarize, not on those exact words to a student. It's like the person that you already are, everything that you bring to the table is a gift, is unique, and you have to embrace them, acknowledge them, because once you do that, then you can carry yourself with confidence, and confidence will lead to more success. And again, success, however you want to define. Right now, for them, it's like I always tell them, finish school. It's the one tool that no one can take from you. It's yours to have, it's for yours to evolve, and it's for yours to change. Because if you accept yourself truly for who you are, then I think you can be more comfortable in living in a culture that sometimes may not take you so kindly. And there are other times that would embrace you. Today is a way for you to have embraced who I was back then, Barbara. I wouldn't be here if you didn't embrace the student I was then. So I just hope someday is one of my students sitting here, sitting elsewhere, and leading discussions like this, because it takes other people. You just have to find the right people. They say behind every man, there's a successful woman, pushing woman. Behind every woman, there's a tribe or mil otras mujeres that support you, and men too. We can't disregard the role men have in our lives too. In the United States, until men got involved, women got the right to vote. So if you have more than others, help those who have less. It's the it's the need of others that should would lead us to change the world. So, but it start with yourself, with accepting who you are, even the hard parts of you. So that's what I would say.
That was beautiful passage that you shared from the book. I appreciate that. And then adding your comments. This has just been really a wonderful experience, I think, for all of us. You've shared a fresh approach, given us new considerations. And, Kathy, I know you could have continued to just do your important work at the College of St. Mary and said, Barbara, I don't have time to do this for you. So I really appreciate that you took on the responsibility. And, you know, I'm sure there are people on the screen who know you, but I think there's some others that haven't had the wonderful opportunity to get to know you. So this is just a gift for all of us to
Thank
hear from
you.
you today. And I'll ask my final question. Do you have any remaining thoughts for our audience that you would like them to consider before we close things down today?
I think one part that I forgot to mention is in the book about the idea of the melting pot, which is a term that is from 1908. So the fact that we still hear it is concerning. And the melting pot is losing your identity and just melting with everyone else, which is the idea of assimilation. Instead, it's like the idea now of the salad bowl, because you can see the tomato fall, you can see the onions, you can see everything. And that means you belong, but you don't have to lose your true self to belong. And so I think that's what we have to be mindful of, instead of telling people just melt in. Because once it's melted, you can't really tell, you can kind of tell he's there, but not really. And so you can't go back to that person and really understand who they are and what they bring to the table. So I think that would be the last thing I would say. And thank you for having me too. So I really appreciate it. It's been great. It was very self-reassurance reading these books too. So thank you for thinking of me. So.
So Kathy, we have many thank yous coming in from the audience members. Some had to leave early, but they really appreciated the time today. Like I said, you've just given us so much today, and I'm very, very thankful for you. It's been an immense pleasure to have you come back as such an accomplished professional, share your experiences with our Metropolitan Community College audience.